So, for anybody that's been getting on the tails, been getting on the back of WWE for, going out and basically stacking up this Tuesday's NXT and dubbing it as the greatest NXT of all time, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something right now. They probably had this plan. Now, I'm not saying they did, because I know people will argue and say, no, they never did. They never had a plan. We don't know that. Let's keep that in mind. We do not know that. For all we know, they could have had this planned, long ago. They could have had this in the works. Because let's be honest, throughout its history, it has had main stars from Raw and SmackDown show up on the brand, for appearances, matches, and so on. Let's take a look at who the champion. Hold on for a second. Like I was saying, let's take a look at who one of their champions is right now. That would be, Becky Lynch. A Raw star, right? And pretty much all reports is pointing to the fact that she could be built up eventually to face Rhea Ripley. That this is basically the first step, her being the NXT Women's Champion. And that's fine. That's good. But still, she's NXT Women's Champion. Who else did they have as a champion there? The New Day. Who else? Dolph Ziggler. So it's not a surprise that main roster talent, goes down to NXT, performs, and even becomes champions. Look at Baron Corbin. He's back in NXT, and he's a main roster guy. And he's having one of the best, I guess you could say, rejuvenations of his career so far, whether you like him or not. So it's not surprising WWE would decide to capitalize on that, and maybe at the behest of USA, decide to stack NXT, as it's going to be on Tuesday. And we also have to be reminded of this. Okay? As I was saying earlier, who's to say they wouldn't have had this, planned out, long before AEW was told, hey, you're going to go to Tuesdays because we got to use Wednesdays for the MLB playoffs. I'm just saying. So, for those that want to argue and say WWE's doing this because they're worried about NXT, you have a right to your opinion. I'm not going to argue that. But you also have to consider the possibility that WWE may have already had this in the works long before AEW knew they were going to be placed on Tuesday nights for this week and maybe for a few upcoming weeks. I'm just saying. But let's also look at it from another perspective. You can't tell me AEW, whether you like AEW, you're a diehard, AEW for lifer, whatever, or you're just a casual fan that likes all wrestling, if you will, whether it's WWE, AEW, or whoever. You can't tell me that AEW, if the shoe was on the other foot, wouldn't have done the same thing. They would have. Let's not forget. When AEW first started, they were on Wednesday nights against NXT. They were against NXT, and NXT was doing their best to mind their own business. All right? They were doing their best to still be who they are. What does AEW do every week? They stack up their show. They stack it up, and every week, every show was like a pay-per-view. It was. And I'm sure if you would have asked Cody Rhodes and Jay Cargill, who are now part of WWE, if that wasn't the case, Ace and everything, if you would have asked them if that wasn't the case, they would tell you honestly it was. That's my opinion. They would tell you face to face that it was the case. That yes, basically every week was like a pay-per-view because Tony Khan wanted to establish AEW as an entity and also show WWE that, hey, your days of ruling over the wrestling industry are over for now. So they probably tell you that, yeah, every card was built the way it was to be like a little pay-per-view to basically establish and insert, insert their, I guess you could say, their stature as the second biggest promotion in the world, is not the new number one, and that's the true alternative. but to also send a message that WWE doesn't run all wrestling anymore. They don't have control anymore over all wrestling. You know, I mean, again, because look, because here's the thing: if you look at those cards, if you go back and watch those cards, you know, season after season, which I think you can find on demand, you know, from TNT or TBS. If you watch those cards from the very first Dynamite up until NXT went to Tuesdays, you would see the fact that every card was built almost like a pay-per-view. Almost. And I'm not saying AEW didn't continue that trend afterwards. They did. But they kind of started to get into the I guess you could say the rhythm, the groove after a while, to where they put on some good shows, but, you know, it wasn't as, like, prominent as those other shows. And why? Because, again, they were sending a message to WWE that we are the new kid in town, we're the new toy, we're the new cool person and everything, and we're the true alternative, and oh, you don't have a strong hold in the wrestling business as you used to anymore. You know, AEW has done the same thing. Let's be honest. They even did it at one point at several points with Rampage. They have. Anytime WWE would have to overrun SmackDown, you know, on FS1 or even Fox, but mostly FS1, what would AEW do with Rampage? They would build up Rampage's first 30 minutes, like it's a freaking pay-per-view. And why? Because they wanted to establish dominance. They were trying to they were competing with WWE to show them that they will be the one people watch more so than an overrun of SmackDown. That people will tune into them for this and tune you out. So AEW has done this before. The shoe has been on the other foot. And it would probably go back on the other foot if NXT had to move temporarily over to Wednesday nights because of reasons, or if SmackDown or Raw had to go to a Saturday night and compete with Collision. You know, the shoe would basically go back on the other foot, and AEW would do the same thing. So you can't blame WWE for saying, hey, Tuesdays are our night now for NXT, Tuesdays are our night now for our program, for our product, for our wrestling brand. You're not welcome here, and we're going to show you you're not welcome here. Now, look, I'm not saying that fans that love overall pure wrestling and everything are not going to tune into Dynamite. They are. They are going to tune in. There's no doubt about it. But when you talk about ultimate star power, what's the more attractive, program? What's the more attractive show? I'm just saying. Yeah, AEW is going to have star power with Edge and Danielson being in matches. That's great. And they're going to be great matches. Don't get me wrong. But ultimately, who's going to win out? What's going to be more attractive? What looks better on paper? I'm just saying. NXT looks better, right? Now, I'm not saying that's going to help NXT, but obviously having more star power, and people and folks that people are behind and respect and want to see, yeah, I would assume that basically they're going to win out in the end. They're the more attractive show. There's no doubt about it. And everybody listening to this knows that. Everybody that covers wrestling as a fan here on YouTube knows that. They know NXT is going to win out. And also, just like AEW has done when they first began, and back in 2019 and everything, just like they did back then, when they would stack up, like I said, when they would stack up the first few shows on Wednesday nights against NXT, like they were freaking pay-per-views, they were sending a message. They were sending a message that they are the new big boys in town. WWE doesn't have a grasp anymore in the wrestling business. is, on the wrestling business, and that they now own Wednesday nights. And in the end, yes, they did end up getting Wednesday nights. But the point that I'm getting at is AEW has done this. Like I said, they did this with the first 30 minutes of Rampage at times when SmackDown would have an overrun on FS1 or even Fox, if Fox would allow it. They would do that. And again, if things were the other way around, if NXT had to end up on Wednesday nights because they had to be preempted, but let's say by a tennis event like Wimbledon, if you will, Wimbledon. If USA was covering Wimbledon and they had to say, sorry, WWE, we got to move NXT to Wednesdays. You can't tell me if WWE just had plans to do a regular NXT 2-hour show, AEW wouldn't be like, oh, well, let's stack up our show. They would. They would do that, and everyone knows it. All WWE is doing here is establishing to AEW that you can give your special Tuesday night broadcast a fancy name. You could have some good matchups, first-time matchups, if you will. But in the end, it doesn't make a difference. Because you're treading on a night, on a territory that you do not belong in. And we're going to show you why. Now, would they be able to do that even without stacking up NXT the way they did? Probably. And the reason being is because nobody will know that AEW is on Tuesday nights. They won't know. I mean, some probably do. I'm not saying that. But even if they do, they're going to probably forget about it because they're used to seeing NXT or something else on Tuesdays. And then all of a sudden, when they're flipping through the channels and they see AEW, they're going to be like, oh, shoot, I forgot, Dynamite's on Tuesdays this week. It's the fact that AEW right now, no fault of their own, is placed in a situation to where, yes, they can stack up their show as much as they can, just like WWE is, but I think Tony Khan realizes people are probably not going to watch him as much because of the night that they're placed on. And this is what happens when you make a deal, with someone like Warner Bros. Discovery. They are going to basically show you that they value something, something else more over you. And to them, the MLB playoffs, the NBA playoffs, they are more valuable to to Warner Bros. Discovery and their TBS and TNT networks than pro wrestling. And that's the truth. That's the truth. I mean, here's the thing that's crazy. They could easily put... here's what's crazy. Yes, they have an NBA game on Wednesday nights on TNT. You can't tell me that after that game's done, they couldn't show a recording of Dynamite afterwards. They could. But they're choosing not to. You can't tell me that after the MLB playoffs, and maybe I have to check the guide again because maybe they're going to do it this way, but you can't tell me that after the MLB playoff game, they can't show a recording of AEW Dynamite after that. Maybe they will because they're probably Tony Khan's realizing, fans are going to tune in, but not many fans. Because we're on Tuesday for this week. Look, AEW is not to really blame for the predicament they're in right now. Warner Bros. Discovery is to blame. Warner Bros. Discovery is to blame for what they're going through right now. And that's a fact. That is a fact that you know and I know. So, again, when you really look at this, what WWE is doing is giving AEW a taste of their own medicine, that they gave to WWE 4 years ago. When they decided to be on Wednesday nights head-to-head with NXT, like I said, they stacked up all their shows up until the point NXT went from Wednesdays to Tuesdays like a freaking pay-per-view. So all they're doing is giving, is giving NXT a taste of, NXT, but AEW, I should say, a taste of their own medicine. That's all they're doing. And again, if the shoe was on the other foot and NXT had to be on Wednesdays or Raw had to be on Saturdays, AEW would do the same thing with Dynamite and Collision. They would stack up their shows. They would. You know that as well as I do. So for anybody that wants to get on the coattails of WWE for, going up against, AEW for stacking up NXT because of this rare Tuesday night appearance of AEW, look, you have a right to your opinion, more power to you, but I think in the end, this is not, that AEW really had no say in this. They really didn't, because if they did, Tony Khan could have said, look, why don't you let us record our show, film our show, and then we'll broadcast it after the playoffs. Or broadcast it off that NBA game. And then that's it. And what's the NBA game anyway on Wednesday? A preseason game? I think maybe AEW Dynamite's a little bit more important. I'm just saying. But that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. Because again, like I said, they are in a situation that they have no control over. So they're basically stuck in a situation to where they got to do what WBD tells them. It's not any fault of theirs. It's not any fault of theirs. But you can't blame WWE for basically, doing what they're doing because, you don't think Triple H has been waiting for this moment? You don't think he's been waiting for a moment to give Tony Khan a taste of his own medicine? He has. And now that moment's here. And he knows it's going to be a successful one. He knows it. Because again, honestly, I think he even realizes that, we don't have to overkill with all these appearances and everything on NXT of main roster talent. Because he probably knows that even without it, NXT would probably win anyway. Because no one is used to Dynamite being on Wednesdays. They're not. I mean, I think when Dynamite got moved over to Thursday one time because of a similar situation, what happened? Viewership numbers went down. They weren't as strong as they normally are. Yeah, people knew Dynamite was on Thursday for that week, but they went down. And why? Because, like I said, people are not normally used to seeing Dynamite on that night. It's like with any show. It's like with any show, broadcast television or cable or whatever. When you're used to it being on an established night and you're used to sitting down getting ready to watch that show and you don't see it, but then you look and scan the guide on television and you find out, oh, it's going to be on this night. Okay, boom. Even though you'll find that out and you'll probably DVR it and everything just in case you forget about it, which you probably will, you become so accustomed to seeing it on its regular night. You're not used to seeing it on a different night. That's the truth, and that's the truth. So honestly, I think we all realize that NXT would probably win in the end anyway. Even if they didn't stack up, the show the way they are this Tuesday. And again, like I said, you can't say AEW wouldn't do the same thing because they have when they first started, and they currently still do at times. Just in case WWE has to be on FS1, which they're going to be because of the World Series soon and some of the playoffs, of the MLB, you can't tell me they wouldn't do the same thing because they do. Because the first 30 minutes of Rampage on several occasions when that would happen, what happens? They stack it up like the freaking pay-per-view. I'm just saying, folks, don't be so quick to blame WWE to get on their case for what they're doing because AEW would do the same thing. And you know it. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Comment if you like. Live chat during the premiere. And until next time, talk to y'all later.